Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is, pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a comedy podcast to help you find your inspiration. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. We have a great guest for you today. It's improviser and actor from Edmunton and Vancouver, Amy Shostak. We have a really great convo, but before we get to that, let's get a little business out of the way. This is the last interview episode before the holidays. Next week, we're going to be doing a Thanksgiving episode. Then it'll be 3 weeks of mini episodes, a Christmas episode, and then we'll take a week off because we got to. New episodes with guests will come back the first week of January. We'll still be releasing newsletters every Monday, and the festival blogs will go up the 1st of December and January. So be on the lookout for that on our website, thereitispod.com. I couldn't be more thrilled that Amy is our last interview of the year. We had a really great talk about improv, the responsibilities she took on when she was an artistic director at the Rapid Fire Theater in Edmonton, and she says about the way all you Americans who love Canadians want to hear. So if you're playing at home, every time you hear her do that, take a sip of your Labatt Blue. Well, let's get right to it. Here's my chat with Amy Shostak. Thanks so much for being here. You're a rock star in the improv world, so it's an honor to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. What a treat.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So from my research, it looks like you at least started at Rapid Fire in 2002, which was, your first year in college?
I was my first year, in college. I just finished high school, and Rapid Fire Theater had a very thin cast, and they were like, let's take a bunch of people that are taking workshops. So I got to start doing shows Friday and Saturday nights. I had only been improvising for like a year or two before that. And that was the start of the whole thing.
Wow. Okay. What drew you to improv a year or two before that?
Well, I had a very encouraging high school drama teacher named Lynette. She's still teaching to this day in Edmonton. And I was in drama class, but I was always like the shy kid. I would be in the chorus of a musical. I'd always be like doing a box step or like polishing a banister in the background. And she was like, I think you should be like the fourth member of the improv team. Like, we need one more person. I think you'd be great. And at that point, I had been like watching a lot of improv. My friends and I would go see Rapid Fire Theater on the weekends. And so, I was like, sure, I'll try it. But I was absolutely terrified and still very shy. And so, I feel like improv is, one of the things in obviously my whole life that's made me more confident and, just more social as a person.
That's really awesome. Thank you, Lynette, for that suggestion, because
thanks, Lynette.
You've inspired a lot of people along the way in your improv journey. And it's really great to hear you say that doing improv has helped you come out of your shell and gain confidence. That's super cool. Are there specific things that you can point to improv giving you confidence in?
I mean, I remember feeling so terrified of starting scenes, of being the first person on stage and not having anyone there with me. And I think through just like will and grit, you do that over and over again, and you suddenly, come to the point where you're like, oh, actually, it's not that bad. It's okay to be on stage alone. I do know how to start a scene. And I feel like that's kind of the same with like a conversation in real life. It's like you get more and more comfortable just taking a chance and, saying something that's on your mind. And so, I think for me, that's been a huge learning through improv, is just to be like, I'll just ask the question, or I'll say the thing.
Oh, that's super cool. When you started at Rapid Fire, like you said, that was a year or two in, and it's college, was there a different style of improv that you were doing at Rapid Fire than from what you did in high school? Was high school like maybe more short form?
Yeah, so Rapid Fire at the time, they used to run a high school theater sports tournament. And so I was pretty like steeped in short form and theater sports from the very beginning.
Hmm.
And then a couple years into improvising at Rapid Fire doing theater sports, we got to start doing the long form show on Saturday nights, which was always like an experimental long form show
Uh-huh.
because at the time, our artistic director, Jacob, he had traveled a bit. He had been to Europe, he had been to the States, and he was coming back with these long form ideas that just kind of weren't existing really in Canada. And I think there's an interesting style thing that happened in Canada, especially in the early 2000s, where long form was very organic and also
Hmm.
very storytelling focused. And so a lot of the long forms that we did were really narrative focused, narrative heavy, maybe like an improvised movie or an improvised genre piece.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I got to try that out as well a few years into my improv training.
Okay, cool. How
Mhm.
great was it to be able to start improv so early in life?
Pretty great. I mean, I feel like as I mentioned, Rapid Fire has the theater sports tournament for youth, and there's also something in Canada called the Canadian Improv Games, which is a national organization that does improv in junior high schools, as we call them, and high schools,
Mhm.
and so yeah, I mean, a lot of improvisers here have come up through those programs, and so it's pretty remarkable when someone's on a improv team when they're in university or they're training at a school and they're on a team and they've actually already they're like I've been improvising for 8 years since I was like 12.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, okay, you're so talented. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. But I also think with that comes um, as the more you improvise, sometimes you have expectations of what improv is. And so sometimes,
Hmm.
you might be someone who's been improvising since they were 12, but then you get a little bit ingrained in like the way to do it or the way you think it should be done. And so, yeah, I think the constant challenge for everyone, no matter what time they start improvising, is to just be open to new ways and new ideas and try all the stuff.
Right. I think what I've gauged from people who started out doing short form is they are really adaptable to different styles and also different forms as well. Like it's I don't know what it is about short form, but it just seems to really get the mechanics and also the fundamentals down for a lot of people. It's great to see, honestly.
Yeah, I remember when I started improvising, I couldn't wait to do long form. I just felt like short form was just, the annoying little brother of long form, and now that I have got to do both so much, I really believe that they're all kind of the same.
Hmm.
It's kind of
Yeah.
the same. It's like, can you do a scene? In a long form, we might be trying to like find the game of the scene and build on
Hmm.
that and take it somewhere. But if you can't do that in the first scene, then you're not going to be able to maybe sustain the long form or figure it out. And with short form, can we look at the variety that we need in the show? Do we have a good sense of what we've done and a good sense of what we should do to like surprise the audience and mix it up? I think those skills are all very transferable. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I always say there's no hierarchy of style in improv.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a short form hater by any stretch. I have heard of I've heard some big name people even hate on short form.
Sure.
And of course, like any style can maybe not be as strong as others, but and it's just because of an approach, but it doesn't make that whole form lose merit or anything like that. I just I just don't see it that way. It's just whether or not you want to do it, and that's fine.
Yeah, I always think anyone who blames the format is missing the point.
Right.
It's
Totally.
like if you're a great improviser who can be adaptable and be curious about everything, you can kind of do anything that you want to
Yeah,
do. So, I get it. It's like people have preferences. Absolutely. There's no reason
sure.
why you have to do long form or you have to do short form. But I'm just like, I don't know. I've really come back to short form and been like, this is so fun. I love it
Right.
now. I'm back in
Oh,
for
yeah.
all
Oh,
the
for
years
sure.
that I was like out, I'm back in.
Yeah. I just feel like short form gets a bad rap from people if maybe they have just seen short form where people were being pithy or something like that. And so
Hmm.
they just blame all short form, but that's just not the truth, Like maybe those people who did it were, hacky or something, but I mean, you can't blame that on all of short form because we've all seen Whose Line Is It Anyway? We know that it can be great. I
Yeah.
when you mentioned people who said they were 12 when they started, that kind of boggles my mind in a good way. I think it's great, all of the different things that people could do. But when I was 12 years old, I don't even know if I had heard of Whose Line Is It Anyway yet. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, the options were sports or music. Those were the extracurricular activity options.
Hmm.
And if you didn't want to do either of those, then it's like, all right, well, I guess you're just going to be at home then. Read, play video
Yeah.
games. Like you didn't have a ton of other options.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because I think one thing with children is that they well, maybe at 12 not so much, but when they're younger, they're obviously really good improvisers. They're really good at imagining and not judging themselves and just kind of going with it. And then I
Hmm.
think as you get older, more of those social norms make you more afraid to try things, and so sometimes you'll work with a group in grade 7, so like 12-year-olds who are incredible, who are so confident, who are ready to jump in and do anything. And then you'll work with them like 3 years later and they'll be kind of in that
Hmm.
receding phase where they're like, I don't want to go, like I don't want to look silly or be embarrassed or
Right.
whatever.
Oh, the teenage years are tough.
They are. And so it's super interesting. I think, for folks who maybe start improvising a little bit when they're a little older, they bring a lot of their experience to their improvisation. And I think, I don't know, I don't think there's necessarily an answer there. I work every week with a group of 55 plus improvisers, some of whom are in their, 70s and 80s, and they're amazing. Like some of them it's their first time improvising, but they just don't care.
Yeah.
They're just like, I'm at a point in my life where I don't care what other people think. And
Yeah.
they're so great. And so I
Hmm.
really think, all we do in improv is to strip away fear.
Hmm. Oh, yeah.
Fear of failure, fear of being embarrassed, fear of saying something we didn't know was in us. And
Hmm.
so for older folks, it's pretty amazing when they're just like, yeah, I don't like, I'm not afraid. This is imaginary. This is make believe. I've been through so much stuff in my life. I'm just able to go for it.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think it is incredible when people can start improvising when they're 12, and also that it's never too late.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I heard there's an old friend of mine who's, I believe, still in his 60s, but he might be in his 70s now, who started doing improv in his 60s. And I remember after something, I can't remember if it was a workshop or what, but he was like, I started too late. And it's like, you started at just the right time. Like there is no too late or too soon. It's when you
Hmm.
want to start doing it is the right time to start doing it. And even if I'll even say if somebody thinks about doing it for a few years before they feel confident enough to try it, they still started at the right time. Like
Hmm.
just start when you want to start. There's no rules to this.
Totally. And I think that, every person is individual, and growth is individual. And I know for myself, like when I started improvising, it felt like everything was a new, oh my gosh, it's my first show. And then, oh, it's my first note session. And everything is this new, like magical thing when you get to have all these firsts.
Mhm.
And then when you improvise for a while, you realize there are those like growth spurts, and then there are also plateaus.
Yeah.
And those plateaus are the points often when people, decide to step back or quit or pursue
Mhm.
something else, which is fair, but also getting comfortable on that journey and being like, I'm in a plateau. What are some things I can do to, mix it up, get out of the plateau, or take a break or whatever. And I think
Right.
yeah, that's a journey. That's something for sure.
After college, speaking of journey,
Mm.
you start working at Rapid Fire, and you're then an assistant artistic director at this point. And you were that for a
Mhm.
few years, and then you were the artistic director for several years. What when you started that, what was because that was, we're talking 2007, and
Mhm.
so theaters there hadn't been a ton by that point. I mean, I think in 2007 there was, of course, IO, Groundlings, Second City. Of course, you know about Second City in Canada, um,
Mhm.
and I guess UCB had been going for a few years at this point, but big theaters wasn't as commonplace as it is now.
Mhm.
Having an artistic director isn't wasn't as common just because there are only as many theaters as there were. There are only as many artistic directors as there were theaters. So, what did you draw from? What could you draw from to sort of have an approach and have an end goal? Maybe not end goal, but have a purpose in the role.
Mm. I felt super lucky. Edmonton is a city of about 1 million people, so it's small-ish. For Canada, it's medium-ish, but for the States, it's small. And it's also a university town, so a lot of improvisers kind of, or a
Come
lot
and
of people
go.
trying improv
Yeah.
through the university, and so yeah, I felt so lucky to have this space where, we had a theater that we rented. We didn't own a theater. Actually, Rapid Fire is just now, hopefully getting a theater of their own that they'll own, which is super exciting. And yeah, Rapid Fire started in, I think, what year was it? I'm not sure. But anyway, I think it's their 36th or 37th season. So, Rapid
Wow.
Fire has been around for a
In the
lot of
90s,
those.
right?
Yeah, like I think they started 86 or 88 or something. Um, so yeah, so Rapid Fire did have a long legacy, and I luckily had some really great previous artistic directors that, even though they were off in other parts of the world, like Patty Stiles, who now lives in Australia, or Kevin Galeese, who used to be the AD at Dad's Garage in Atlanta,
Mhm.
I could still reach out to them and be like, what is happening? Like, can you help me whenever I had a crisis or whatever? And I really, really drew upon them a lot. But I came to the role, I'd say reluctantly. It was kind of like Kevin got the job at Dad's Garage Theater in Atlanta. And it was like, we need someone. And originally it was like an interim position. And then it kind of just I continued to do it, and it was really like learning on the fly. Like I had no administrative experience. I had no experience with grant writing, no experience with budgets. But our general manager was super supportive, and the board was super supportive, and I was able just to kind of learn on the fly. And yeah. Also pull from other theater companies in the city. Edmonton has a really great theater scene, believe it or
Mhm.
not. I know it's kind of like the Austin, Texas of Canada. It's like it's in
Okay,
a
cool.
very, very conservative province, but it's a very like liberal place.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so
We got a lot of cities like that here in
yeah, yeah,
America.
yeah. Totally. So there was lots of other theater artists that could also help me learn how to yeah, do all that adulting that I wasn't quite prepared for as a new arts administrator. Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
And as an artistic director, what was, I mean, obviously, like you mentioned, the grant writing and that stuff was new. When it came to the direction of the theater, did you have to go a whole new direction, or is it sort of keeping the ship steady when it came to perspective?
So my approach was always that growth isn't always the goal. We don't
Mhm,
always need more shows. We don't always need more money. I really just tried to focus on understanding how people in the ensemble felt,
mm,
what they needed to make their work satisfying, and how we could become kind of closer and more aligned as an ensemble in terms of like pulling in the same direction. Like, what are
mhm,
our collective goals? And
mhm.
I spent probably like the first couple years just on that because I was like, that's something I felt that just maybe hadn't had as much focus in the past. Um, and also trying to build in structures that kind of support the ensemble, like writing more anti-harassment policies or like building out, how do people get into the ensemble? Is it auditions? Is it they're inviting your friends? What is the process? And at that time in like whenever that was, 2006, 2000, no, 2009, yeah, there all those processes just kind of hadn't been built out. So that was
Mm.
kind of my approach. And then we lost our theater. Our space got redeveloped, and so we got kind of kicked out for a few years. And so we
Mm,
moved across the city to a different arts venue,
mm.
and that was a big transition, and that took up,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, a lot of
To
my
go
brain
across
power.
the city anywhere, yeah. I mean, people get really used to going to this one spot, and when you have to completely change your routine on how you're getting there, that's a big change for everyone.
For sure. And the good thing was that we got to expand a lot. We got to add more shows. We added a festival. We got to, yeah, just kind of grow our programming. But yeah, that was a really big transition. Yeah, changing theaters and being the person that was like, I'm going to wear this whether it works or not.
For sure. When you are still there, because you were there like 14 years,
hmm
when it comes to what people need so that they feel like they have what they need to perform and to be a part of the community, what is it you look for in order to help them with that? Like, how do you do that essentially, I guess?
we just like set up, I mean, it's not hard. We just set up like meetings a couple times a year with every
Mhm,
performer to like check in. And we had like a two-way feedback kind of process. And that just hadn't been done. And so there
mm.
was a lot of like, it would be like we'd do a note session, everyone would go to the bar, and then everyone would kind of like have a side conversation about what they really thought.
Yeah, which
And I
makes it
just,
so hard. Like,
yeah,
when someone asks you what you feel, and then you tell them one thing, and then you go to the bar and like, "Here's how I really feel." It's like, you're not helping the communication process.
totally. And I think that's still, I mean, I can't say that I was the person who got rid of that because I'm sure that was still happening. I know it was still happening, but just
Mhm,
trying to provide more opportunities for people to like yeah, share their thoughts in an open way, hopefully. And then secondly, really trying to focus on development and giving people opportunities, like being like,
yeah.
"Hey, I see you. I think you should direct a show." Like, and we created this experimental festival called Bonfire, which is
Mhm,
supposed to be
mhm.
like improv ideas that maybe we haven't tried before as the ensemble, or maybe we've seen somewhere else, or maybe we've just dreamt them up and they're absolutely bonkers. And that show was like that festival was a great opportunity to be like, okay, yeah, there's someone who's been improvising for like 6 months in our ensemble. Let's get them to direct a show. Um,
Mhm.
and another thing that we did in our note sessions is that we had say we'd have an improviser, like a junior improviser, who would give notes to the senior improvisers. Um, so just trying to like level that kind of implied hierarchy
Oh,
by
interesting,
being
yeah.
like, yeah, like there's, someone maybe who has less experience, but they might see different things than we see. And so
Right.
just trying to make that common and make that normal in our group to be like, yeah, anyone can share thoughts, anyone can give notes.
Oh, that's super cool. How does that play into having representation on stage? Of course, this is something that I think everyone is having to have a reckoning with. And obviously, there's subjugated people, but there are also people who aren't subjugated, but aren't also necessarily represented on stage. What are your thoughts on how people in artistic director roles or executive director roles can encourage more representation on stage?
Hmm. Well, um, like in my time at Rapid Fire, I really, at the time, my thinking was really around like gender. And I'll say now that that's a limited view and that's not an intersectional view, but that's where my mind was at, was we need more women. And that was also the word I knew at the time. We need more
Mhm.
women on stage was my thing. I was just like, we need to have shows that are all women. We need to have a theater sports match that's all women, that's not marketed as women's night or whatever. It just needs to
Right,
be
yeah. Treat
normalized.
it like it's normal, right?
Yeah.
Because it is. Guess what, world?
Yeah,
If there's
totally.
a team that's all Aboriginal people, that's not some weird thing. Like, it's just normal
Yeah,
because people are people, and having people, especially underrepresented people on stage, is not some novelty. It's a
totally.
normal thing. Yeah.
And at the time at Rapid Fire, I was just like sick of there was always this conversation around women in comedy that was like at the time, which is now, I guess, like whatever, 15 years ago, that was like, we want to have more women. We just don't know where to find them. And, and I was just like, yeah, your classes are uncomfortable for women. They don't want to
Hmm.
come. Or maybe they're not interested because they go to see your shows and they don't see any women. So I was just like,
Right.
my approach was like, let's just rip the band-aid off and cast a show that is, gender pair in quotes,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
let's just do it. And, it was also always like, oh, but those women don't have as much experience. They're not as good. And it's like, well, I don't care. They're good. They're going to get good by being on stage. Like, who cares?
Right.
And
As
so,
if any of those people saying that were, what they consider good. They did, like, as if they met their bar when they first were regularly performing.
exactly, exactly. And I've been in touch with a number of organizations, and that's always the discussion around representation is like, oh, people aren't ready yet. We just need to, we need more development. Development is great. We do need development, but for me, I was like, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Let's get it going. And so I think in terms of representation, like obviously, yes, it's having folks on stage, getting folks on stage, adding them to the ensemble, but it's also creating ensembles that feel safe, that and you need to have representation that runs all the way through the organization, on the artistic staff, on the board, in the workshop instructors. It has to go through the whole organization. And then
Hmm.
from there, I think, once those people are there, we also need to be aware of who speaks the most, who has the most airtime on stage,
Yeah.
because I know for me, coming up, it was always like, I'm on stage, I am quote unquote representing a woman on stage, but I'm talking a tenth of the time. Like my scene partner is talking most of the time. So all those things, they all kind of, yeah, once we do one of them, then there's always so much more to do, to think about, how can we encourage folks to be in positions of power, who speaks the most, who gives the notes, who makes the decisions, all that stuff,
Hmm.
I think is yeah, is kind of representation 2.0 or whatever.
For sure. I think a big issue for some people too is just not liking change. They might be all for representation on stage, but then they start seeing, oh, but then maybe I won't get as much stage time, or maybe
Hmm.
my favorite show or favorite team will get cut and change, and they just don't like that change. And
Hmm.
I don't think there's a way to move forward and then also address those problems people have. Sometimes they just have to suck it up, unfortunately. But you know, there are ways to appease people in a widespread way at theaters. They're 7 days a week. When we are truly past COVID, it'll be a little bit easier to do 7 nights a week and multiple shows a night. But with that much time, you can really get a lot of different people on stage. And I think while some people may not be able to enjoy a weekly performance, uh, it's all for the better in the long term, it seems like.
I totally agree. And I think, that's a scarcity mentality, to be like, oh, have to lose something for someone else to get something. And on
Yeah.
some level that may be true, you know. I think there's power in like getting invited to a show, asking who else is on the show, and then being like,
Mhm.
actually, I don't think you should have me on the show. I think you should, you know, invite an Indigenous person or a Black person to do the show instead of me.
Mhm.
Because it's an all white show. And that's like a
Mm.
power that we have as for me as like a white person, white cisgendered woman, is to be like, I happily give up my spot for someone else because I don't know. I've had how many shows have I had in my life? And there's no shortage of them.
Right.
Improv shows, you could be doing 12 improv shows a week before the pandemic for free and
Yeah.
not being compensated for them. But
Right.
um
Yeah.
like I don't know. I'm like, there's no shortage of improv shows.
Right.
They're made up, they're imagined. We can do them
Right.
anywhere. We can do them in any
Right.
space, any bar. Like,
For sure.
why are we holding on to them so tightly? And I think it's just like it's power. Sometimes people say
Mhm.
it's money, you know. Make my $50 at my show or whatever. I'm like, you can make $50
Elsewhere
doing
too.
other things. Like, it's not about the $50. It's about feeling like you are owed that space. And
Yeah.
you know, I think in yielding that, there's such a freedom in being like, oh, it's just another show. Like, who
Yeah.
cares?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's sort of like when people talk about, like, this is a big thing in America that I'm sure is annoying for people from other countries to hear as much as it is for me to hear. But people will talk about freedom and, oh, if they get this, it's like, taking freedom away from me. And freedom is something that anyone can enjoy, and you're not losing any for someone else to have more freedom or to not be subjugated. It's just, unless you think freedom is subjugating other people, in which case I think you have a wrong understanding of what freedom is. And it's the same with this. It's like it's time, and time is kind of endless and
Mm,
made up. It's just the way we observe things passing.
mm.
But you're still going to get your stage time somewhere somehow.
Yeah. And also like w- as a white woman, it's like I gain a lot from sitting back and watching a show where maybe people I've never seen perform before or folks I haven't seen represented on stage before perform.
Mhm. Mhm.
And to be on stage with those folks too, I get to learn a lot and experience a lot of different things. And I think as improvisers, we want to be curious about everything. You know, we should
Mhm.
be curious about what it's like to sit back and watch a show. Like, I don't know, I hope lots of improvisers go and just sit down and watch a show, but I know a lot of them don't. I know I don't as much as I should. Um, but it's I don't know, I do think it's essential to stay curious and be like, yeah, what would it be like to, I don't know, hang back in the scene?
Right.
What would it be like to yield, give space, be aware of the group? Does that person look like they're having fun? All that stuff. So, yeah, that's what I think.
I 100% agree. That is all like sitting and watching the show or being on stage and stepping back and seeing how someone else takes something. You talked about something that's somewhat separate. You mentioned you referenced something that's somewhat separate from this topic of observing and saying, is that person having fun? If you are on a show and you're standing on the sidelines and you see someone in the scene who doesn't seem to be having fun, how do you address that?
That's a great question. I think I try to be really aware of not about stage time, but about who has had their like imprint on the show. Like who, you know, in the concrete has put their handprint on the show. And I look around and I go like, oh, we haven't really seen like a shiny moment for Jason. So, you know, whether that's like, I don't know, endowing you and bringing you on stage for a scene, or whether that's narrating you into a monologue, or I don't know, something, or coming up on stage and maybe just doing a different scene, but trying to make the content something that I know that maybe would excite you and maybe you'd want to join. Um, those are some ideas, but yeah, I think I had a group last night, actually. It was our first student show back with the school that I teach at in Vancouver called Blind Tiger Comedy. And we had our first student show back, and I have this great long form class. They're amazing. And backstage, I was like, just focus on like that imprint idea. Like, let's just make sure everyone has a shiny moment, and whether they take it themselves or whether they're, given that.
Mm.
Let's just make sure that happens. And they totally did it. And I was just so like happy. And some of them are improvisers who are like supporters who hang back, who want to analyze
Mhm,
before they
mhm.
jump in. And some of them are those people that are like, would just be center stage the whole time if given the opportunity. But they found this like sweet spot of being able to balance it. And I feel like that's when improv is at its best. That's when it really feels like an ensemble versus just kind of like every person for themselves.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh, for sure. What sort of things this is a very random question, but there are certain things that you always kind of hear about when people talk about issues on stage, someone who is steamrolling or hogging and stuff like that. That seems relatively addressed. But what sort of new things are not maybe addressed as much that are
Mm.
not as helpful for improv? I'm trying to not say wrong or bad, but
Mm.
just not as helpful.
Well, I'm really curious. I'm really curious about this question. Even the idea of steamrolling, I'm like, I used to perform with this improviser in Edmonton who's a brilliant person, like whose mind
Hmm.
just works faster than mine. I don't know.
Hmm.
They're just so good at narrative, connecting ideas, character, and I found my best tactic with them was to try and surprise them. Like,
Uh,
because they could puppet master a whole show, they could really like direct it from the inside. And my best tactic with them was just to be like, monkey wrench them, say something that surprises them, throw them off. And then you could actually see them like kind of come to life, like in their
oh,
eyes. It would be
interesting.
like, you know, now we're off track. We're not going along with your plan. Um, and these questions of that, like the moment to moment, how we deal with stuff on stage, I think, ooh, they're just some of the most exciting questions to explore. Stuff like interrupting comes up a lot,
Hmm.
where a student might be like, I just can't get a word in edgewise. I just keep getting
Yeah.
interrupted. And there's some, all these different tactics that we can kind of like come up with together, like pause for a really long time, see if
Hmm.
they just burn themselves out. um, uh, one thing that I use a lot, and I've used it a lot in like what I would call like tricky situations where I'm like, oh my gosh, even the audience is like not loving this, is like narration. And I know that
Oh,
it's, it doesn't live in the style of all improv theaters, but to be like,
right.
and they talked through the night and time passed, and that character, they went to bed. Like you can absolutely like bend space and time in improv. So sometimes to navigate our way out of stuff, that's a great tool that I love.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, I don't
I've
know.
heard some really fun, silly things like that before too, where there was some. I think this was something that Beershark Mikes did, where someone was. Uh, it seemed like someone didn't understand what another improviser was doing, so that other improviser said, "Hey," and he said the person's name. He's like, "Can I talk to you over here for a second?" And
Yeah.
they acted like they stepped out of the scene. They're
Mm,
like, "Hey, when I said this, did you understand what I meant?" Like, "Oh no, I
yeah.
thought you meant this." It's like, "Okay, no, I mean this." It's like, "Oh, okay, let's get back in the scene." It was
Yeah.
super funny that I didn't see that. Someone told me about it. And I just thought, what a delightful way to address a hang up in a scene.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a great one too, right? Like breaking the scene and being like, "Jason, do you really feel that way about me? That thing you just said to me? Oh my
It's like,
gosh."
no, no, I was talking as the character.
Oh, okay. And even that like dispels that for the audience. They're like, "Okay, good." You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And we can also do that from inside the character, right? We can have
Mhm.
commentary from the improviser that comes from the character. And
Mhm.
like all of those tactics I think are so important for anyone who is marginalized, in quotes
Right.
again, to know, because it's like I'm a big believer that everyone has agency on stage, and everyone should leave the stage with their dignity intact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we all can use those tools however we need to have those two things, to have agency and to be able to leave with our dignity intact. So
Right.
whether that destroys the reality of the scene, and our teacher might be like, hey, like, you destroyed the reality of the scene. Who cares? I don't care. I want you
Right.
to leave the show feeling like, yeah, I did what I needed to do to like tell the audience that I'm okay and that they're okay, and that
Uh-huh.
by
Right.
coming to this show they're okay.
Absolutely.
um
There have been times when I was doing a scene where I think everyone knew I was making a joke, but it was one of those things where it was like, but what if he's not, was sort of lingering in people's minds. And
mhm,
so we all got through it, and the teacher was like, well, uh, when you do a joke, a gag like that, or a bit like that in a scene, just let everyone know where you're coming from, and sort of address it from within that way. And I thought, oh, I didn't know that was allowed, or even like fully breaking the scene and
mhm,
stepping out of it for a second. You just think, oh, I didn't know we could do that. I was just kind of caught in the scene for a moment there for the rest of the scene because I didn't know how to address that issue. And it's like, well, it's a creative endeavor. You can be creative. You don't have to follow these rules to a T because we are just trying to have fun with each other.
mhm. And
It's
that's
not like I put a door in a certain space and someone just acted like a door wasn't there. We're talking about like how we're interacting with each other.
Yeah, and I've been John Ghibertatios from Huge Theater.
Hmm.
Um he kind of brought to our school this idea of just saying time out. So whether
Oh yeah,
if
yeah.
you're in a scene or on stage, or even if you're just having a conversation as a class and someone says time out, it's just kind of like a moment where I like to think of it as like your intuition is just telling you, I don't know about this. Like, this is
Hmm.
something's not right
Hmm.
here. It's a bit icky. Um, and in that moment, you can either say pass, like, can we just let's do a new scene, or let's change the topic or whatever, or you can debrief it with your group. But, you know, learning improv and growing up, I never was taught that we have an opportunity to just go like, I'm good. I don't want to do this scene anymore, or like time out,
Right.
or those just weren't tools that were kind of taught to us. And so
Oh yeah.
I feel like, a lot of improvisers from my generation and older are kind of like, no, you have to like work through it, like, oh, figure it out, like work through it in the scene. There's
Mm.
value maybe in,
It's case by case. If someone feels attacked, then maybe working it out in the scene isn't the best method there.
yeah,
Maybe that's something they need to talk about after the show.
yeah.
But if it is something where it's like, wait, are you making fun of conservatives or are you just doing what they're doing? Which
Hmm.
then is a problem. It seems like you're making fun of them, but I just want confirmation. That's a thing to work out in a scene. If someone's
Hmm.
doing some sort of Archie Bunker thing where they're being offensive to point out how ridiculous it is to be that way,
Hmm.
then work that out in a scene. But even then, sometimes it could get dicey.
For sure. And I think one thing I've just been really trying to explore in myself, but also encouraging my students to explore, is like, is it is it scary because you've never done improv like this before? Is it scary because it's kind of scary exciting? There's a lot of fear in improv, so we don't need
Mhm.
to stop every scene where something feels like, oh, I'm a bit afraid. But
Right.
it's like, is this challenging, your agency or your dignity, or is this making you feel icky? Then we just don't need to do it. And people
Right.
have, everyone's different. People have different
Right.
tolerance for that, and
Yep.
I think the audience can really tell when folks go into that like icky scared zone, where it's like
Yeah.
I'm shutting down, I'm not making eye contact with my partner, I'm like
Mhm.
diminishing my body language. We don't
Right.
we don't need to see that. And
Mm-mm.
like it just makes the audience uncomfortable too. And I think back to like so many instances in my, younger improv career where it's just like watching it and no one knows what to do, and you're just like,
Yeah.
ah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just having some more language and some more tools around that, I think makes everyone feel more more confident and just being like, yes,
Yeah.
stuff's gonna come up. That's never gonna stop coming up. And I believe you can do improv about any topic as long as everyone's being taken care of and feels comfortable and is taking care of the audience too. And so
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're only gonna get there
Uh,
by trial and error, but if the spirit is always to like take care of each other
hmm
and also be accountable when we screw up,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Because that's a big trust thing. I mean, I've had experiences in class. Well, I guess I didn't directly have an experience. I just have seen in classes where somebody was sort of ignoring what the room was feeling and what their scene partners were feeling about something being too far. And they just sort of plowed through. Either they were oblivious or they didn't have a problem with the fact that everyone was uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
that was sort of like, well, I just don't know how to trust you if you didn't realize that
Hmm.
and you didn't care about that, and if it gets called out and they just sort of brush it off and shrug their shoulders and it's like, ugh, then I really don't trust you to handle sensitive material or me being vulnerable with you in a scene.
Hmm.
It is an important thing for everyone to sort of know, hey, here are things that can come up and you have recourse for
Hmm.
handling it, even in the scene. And giving people tools really is empowering. It doesn't slow things down. It actually will speed things up.
Hmm. And I think we're like, we're working in an art form where people are in like adrenaline mode and like kind of fight or flight mode a lot. And the more you train, hopefully, the more you're able to like breathe and
Yeah.
actually pay attention and be in the moment. But I saw a bunch of students go up for the first time last night. It's like they're not breathing, they're not making eye contact. They're just like they're having this like verbal diarrhea and like yeah, I don't know, stuff's going to happen and as long as they're like able afterwards to debrief it, understand what happened, how they were a part of that, whether, if that's a problem, and then kind of take it from there. I think yeah, we're in a much better place than like not talking about it, muscling
Yeah.
through all the old ways.
Yeah. This has been brilliant to talk about with you, but I do want to talk about festivals because you have run a couple of festivals
Hmm.
while you were at Rapid Fire. You mentioned earlier Bonfire, but there was also Improvaganza.
Hmm.
And recently you have done the Vancouver Improv Festival.
Yeah.
How does trying to build equity and have representation play into running a festival?
Great question. Yeah, I feel super lucky to be able to help organize the Vancouver Improv Festival, and I started in 20. Well, I started kind of shadowing in 2018, and then I took over in 2019. Oh boy, yeah, and then I got to
Yeah.
experience the whole pandemic,
Yeah.
and we just had our festival in October, and it was kind of like a hybrid. We had some in person and some online stuff. Um,
hmm
yeah, I would say in terms of equity, I don't know. I'm just like let's let's have a diverse festival. Like let's have diverse instructors. Let's bring we always have applications and part of that is I think it's important to have some kind of process where people can apply so that you can learn about new groups that maybe you didn't know about before.
hmm
But I also think there's a balance. And I think that as a festival organizer, you're allowed, if you don't get what you need in your applications, you're allowed to be like, well, I know this great group, from wherever. I'm going to bring them out because we need them. We want them.
hmm
They're amazing. And so I think being transparent about that in your processes, whether that's on your application, how do decisions get made? What are the lenses you're looking through in terms of putting together your program, and also trying to be as transparent as possible about payment and about honorariums and about travel, which I know a lot of festivals don't have the luxury of having a ton of money to pay out to artists, but that's something I really think is important. And I mean, I do believe running a smaller festival and giving the artists more to do, but being able to like pay their airfare, pay them a small honorarium, it just creates I don't know. For me, that's where my taste lies, where I'm like, I'd rather see like a duo do 2 or 3 shows, maybe guest on a jam show, and then teach some workshops, than have them come out for one show and not pay them. Like it's
Yeah.
just not a model that I really yeah, think is cool. And I know for myself,
Hmm.
like when I've been touring to festivals, my favorite festivals are the ones where they're like, we'll pick you up at the airport and we'll take you to your hotel that we paid for. And we'll just make you feel like you're really needed and welcomed here. And I think that's part of also, creating a festival with representation. And that includes a lot of people, making those people feel cared for and welcomed, rather than being like, get into the from the airport on your own and
Yeah.
find your own billet and we're not going to pay you. It's like, okay.
And also, I read where one of the suggestions you had was to have someone you like pick them up because you don't want to just say like, hey, who will do it? Because then sometimes you can get a problematic person who's unaware that
Sure.
they give off the vibe, the unsettling vibe that they give off.
Yep.
But they love the theater and they love the community, and everyone needs community, whether they are uh, creepy or not.
Yeah,
Um, some people are harmless, but if they're creepy and harmless, it's still creepy.
for sure.
And but those people kind of need the community more than anybody, so you don't want to
Mm.
push them out. But maybe you don't have that person uh, 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 picking someone up, and who knows what happens and how they unsettle someone.
Yeah, I think
Be the guest.
talking about trust, it's like you can think about that on stage and then you can, zoom out and think about that in terms of your whole event and be like, and it's hard, when we're financially we don't have what we need to do what we want to do, but being like, who do I trust to host this show? You know, if we have some performers of color, there's a great group here in Vancouver called Fistful of Kicks. They're an all Asian ensemble that are like amazing. It's
And
like,
that's a great name.
yes. And it's like, who do I trust to host this show? I'm not gonna put like someone who I think might say something problematic in that role. Like,
Hmm.
you want to trust everyone on every level of the organization. Ideally, you can't control it, but you want to bring care and awareness to kind of all those choices as best you can. And then
Hmm. Hmm.
when the thing inevitably does happen, you gotta like address it, which is always really hard to be like, hey, it wasn't cool when you said that in your hosting role. And they're
Yeah.
like, I'm doing it for free. And you're like, I know. Like I wish. I don't know. It's not easy, but it's I think the more of an expectation there is that a festival can take care of the people it brings out, the better. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is. Hmm. I mean, I guess that I'm doing it for free thing that goes back to taking responsibility for what you've done. Essentially, guys, stop bringing women up on stage saying the next comic is a woman.
Totally.
That's annoying.
Yeah.
That's annoying even to me as a cisgender male. I find it annoying. So
Mhm.
imagine what a woman thinks. So don't do it anymore. Uh, well, this has been a great chat. It's now time to create something together.
Mm.
And I'd love to do improv. I know that could be tough over Zoom, but I'd like to I feel like a lot of what we've talked about is like taking care of each other in a
Mm.
scene. So I'd be interested to see how that plays out. And I don't know what your uh, favorite way to get a suggestion is. Do you have a particular thing that you like to do, or suggestion you like to get?
I always like to ask for my duo partner, Jolene, and I always like to ask for like an evocative image.
Oh, an evocative
So it could
image.
be like what do we have before? We've had like a willow tree over a pond, or we've had a tiger in a cage, or just kind of
Mm.
a snapshot of something. We've had a like someone like jumping from building to building.
Mm. Okay.
Those are big ideas.
Um,
A word is also fine.
no, no, I like it. I want to get an evocative image in someone's mind. How about you're walking across the street and a car tries to turn too fast, and
Ooh.
that look on the person's face when they look at the car.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Hmm.
Okay. That was unsettling.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say that.
No.
It's clear to me
I mean,
that you didn't agree.
I just think I just think that the Beatles are better than Rolling Stones. I just and I, yeah, it's like they're both great, but like, come on.
No, come on, Mick. He's
Oh,
he's skinny and he's wearing tight pants and he's doing his
and he
dance.
still can do that. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But the Beatles, come on,
Okay,
they have.
let's talk about Ringo.
Let's talk about it.
You like
Okay.
you like Ringo? You think he's a good drummer?
Look, hey, he may not be as skilled as a Keith Moon or a Steve Jordan, okay? He's not on time the way some are necessarily, but he created a backbeat that is pretty influential. So let's not throw him under the bus.
Okay, but what about the Ringo songs? Okay, what about I believe Yellow Submarine, Octopus's Garden? They're children's songs, Put them on
I
a
mean, okay, fine, but his solo stuff, he had a couple of bangers. They didn't call him that then,
Oh,
but they were.
he had a solo album?
Oh my gosh. You don't even know.
Uh,
I mean, how are we talking about
uh,
the merits of music and you don't know that he had solo albums,
uh,
plural?
yes, could I get another latte, please? Yeah.
Oh yes. Can you actually? I would like another latte, but can you put a little rum in it? Because I'm gonna need it.
Well, I haven't heard his solo albums, to be
Well,
honest.
okay. Well, Spotify. You might want to Spotify some Ringo and just understand how legit he actually was.
I guess I had it all wrong. I'll go check those out.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You really slurp when you sip?
Just wanted to get the foam.
I just No, I just wasn't expecting that. Um, can I get a second shot of rum?
Great. I think that's a perfect ending.
Yeah, I imagine that scene took place at 2 in the afternoon.
Yeah, some kind of bougie cafe for sure.
There it is. That was super fun. Thanks for playing with me and being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It was lovely chatting with you.
It was lovely chatting with Amy too. I hope you enjoyed that. She teaches improv in person and online with Blind Tiger Comedy. Go to blindtigercomedy.ca and follow them on Instagram at BT Comedy. Her improv group, Little Mountain Improv, performs every Tuesday in Vancouver. Follow them on Instagram at Little Improv. Vancouver Improv Festival happens every fall, and they hope to be able to accept international applications in 2022. Go to VancouverImprovFest.com and at Vancouver Improv Fest on Instagram for more info. We will also be keeping you up on fest info in our festival blog and our newsletter. Go to thereitispod.com for info on festivals, our newsletter, and more. Links in bio. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at thereitispod. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.